What's happening, everybody? It's Trey here with reactions to the classics, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Talking Heads debut studio album, Talking Heads 77. And if this is your first time stopping by the channel, we really appreciate it. Here are reactions to the classics. We take a look back at some of the most classic albums of all time, do reviews of them, also have list rankings, live streams, and a bunch of fun stuff. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, consider hitting that big red subscribe button. And when preparing for this review, I was excited because I've heard a lot of good things about the Talking Heads. Never heard any of their full-length albums. I was familiar with Psycho Killer once I started hearing it a little bit, but besides that, I hadn't ever heard any of the rest of the tracks on this record. And if you guys enjoy this review, let me know, and I'll continue to go through the Talking Heads and review them and discuss them with you guys. Always a fun part of the channel. But before we get into the album itself, let's take a look at the history of the group. So the group started as a trio with Rhode Island School of Design alumni David Byrne, who was on guitar and the songwriter, lead vocalist, and you had Chris France on drums and Tina Weymouth on bass. So I like having a female member of a group in here, kind of distinguish them and fit them as a artsy punk type of band in the mid-70s. They started off their career pretty good, I'd say, because they opened up for the Ramones at the famed CBGB venue in New York City. This was pivotal in the punk scene. Groups like Television, Patti Smith, and the Talking Heads were able to sort of get their name out more, and it was just a huge time of musical development and growth in New York City during the mid to late 70s in a variety of genres. And the Talking Heads are one of the premier bands in the new wave genre, sort of an offshoot of punk rock, which we really were seeing in the early to mid 70s. This took some of the ethos of punk, but put its own little flair to it. It's a little bit of different instrumentation and some more thoughtful lyrics. And they actually opened for the Ramones in June of 75. They went to do demos for CBS Records, but unfortunately did not get a deal. But they kept at it, got a little bit of underground fame, and you know how it is. Word of mouth starts to spread, name gets out there a little bit more, and they were finally signed to Sire Records in 76. During 77, they recorded their first single, as well as signed a fourth member of the group, Jerry Harrison. And in April, they went to Sundragon Studios to record their first album, which is what we're going to look at right now. Talking Heads 77, as the name suggests, it came out September 1977. Actually debuted at number 60 on the UK charts, which is pretty nice for a group that doesn't have much, acclaim going into it. Didn't make much of a splash here in the United States. They had Psycho Killer actually break the top 100 chart as a single. We're just going to get right into it with the first track, Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town. Right away, I could tell that Byrne had a unique delivery style, and you're going to notice that throughout the entire record. He has these idiosyncrasies in his voice that they take you aback, and they're different, they're unique, and they make him stand out from a lot of other groups and bands that you'd hear around the time. And that quirkiness, I think, is one of the things that just underlines the Talking Heads as I was listening to this record, and it really draws you in. And this song is no different. Here it talks about how love, it's so simple, yet it intoxicates people, makes people who usually have common sense just kind of lose all their inhibitions and their thought processes, because love, it bites you, man. It just takes control. And everybody who's working just starts to lose interest in that because they're thinking of their love. And so I thought it was a great way for the world to get introduced to the Talking Heads on a proper album. We move on to New Feeling. I wasn't feeling this as much as the opener, but you're going to notice those clean sounding guitars that contrasted well with Byrne's fragmented kind of delivery style. So it was unique in that aspect, but it couldn't live up to the opener. Then we move on to track 3, Tentative Decisions. Some fantastic bass and keyboards, and I think Tina Weymouth is one of the highlights of this entire record. The first part of the song is told from the point of view of a boy. It switches midway through to the girl's point of view here. I thought that was a smart decision on Byrne to just kind of be a little bit witty in here. And I especially like the line, Decide, I Told You What to Say. Confused, Confused, I Told You What to Say. Name of the song, Tentative Decisions. As somebody who doesn't like to make decisions, this one hit a little close to home, all right? But I still enjoyed it, even though it was a little convicting. And then we're gonna go on to track 4, Happy Day. And I ain't even gonna try to hit the high note that David Byrne does on this song. Again, you have that quirkiness in Byrne's voice that just grips you in, though it's a little bit maybe more of a throwaway track to, I think, a lot of people that would listen to it. It had a charm to it that really stood out to me, especially the way that Byrne just crescendos in the chorus with that Happy Day line. I dug it. Track number 5, Who Is It? This track lacks the musical and lyrical depth that the previous 4 tracks did, but when digging into the song, there is an interesting theory out there. Y'all let me know what you think of this, that this is told from the point of view of the psycho killer that we see later on in the album. Here, there's a lot of just rhetorical questions. I mean, the name of the song tells you that right away. Who is it? So, though it's not a highlight for me, coming from the point of view that it is told from the psycho killer's perspective, it worked thematically with the rest of the record. Then we go into a brutally honest track, No Compassion. Here, Byrne lays it out all on the line here about how people will complain about their problems. I'm sure you know people at work or school or wherever you're at in life. They just complain, but guess what? They never do anything to actually fix their problems, and the narrator of this song is just tired of it. He has no compassion. All the compassion he has is spread thin, and he can't deal with it anymore, and he doesn't really care your thoughts on that. I thought this was a unique take from, you know, usually in songs you would want to maybe write from the perspective, oh, gotta love and do this, do that, be there for others. But sometimes, man, you just need to tell people like it is. And this did a great job of it. Again, kind of going into some of the darker themes that touch on this album and just the more humanistic side that is within all of us that sometimes we don't like to admit. And then that goes to track 7, The Book I Read, which had one of my favorite parts on the entire record. Once we kind of get to Byrne, he starts going with these na-na-nas, and then we get a funky music in the background. I thought that it just meshed well together. You kind of wanted to bob your head and dance to it, and the tone of the track wasn't as ominous as the previous few tracks on here, so it gave a nice little breather for what we get later on in the record. And then we're going to move on to Don't Worry About the Government. This was one that grew on me a decent amount. Essentially, this guy just loves, he's in a building by the highway. Again, Byrne has a fantastic vocal delivery here. I thought that it was interesting, the fact that he's just working, just kind of almost a sing-song type of a delivery that Byrne put through here. You just kind of want to, oh yeah, I'm just going through day to day, which is what the song notes. But at the end of the day, are you just disillusioned? Are you just going through, not worrying about the bigger things of life? The song is called Don't Worry About the Government, and he notes about all the people that are underneath him, and it's just a song to make you think a little bit. I definitely recommend looking at the lyrics as you listen to this track. Then after last week, Carefree, I thought it was a solid track. Nothing particularly stand out like the following track, Psycho Killer. It starts with just a killer bass line. Gotta give Tina a shout out yet again here, and it's just really intriguing because there's French lyrics in here that add, I think, to the duality and the crazed nature of this psycho killer. People at the time thought that this was about a serial killer around New York City called Son of Sam, but Talking Heads performed early versions of this song all the way back in 1975. Byrne was inspired by Alice Cooper and his music to plot something down that was in a similar ominous vein, and man, this was definitely the highlight of the entire record. I know it's the most famous track, and I think it's for good reason. It just keeps you gripped the second you hear that opening bass line to the closing notes of the guitar solo towards the end of the song, and you just can't help but love Byrne's style on this track yet again, and how it just messes with the music in the background. Fantastic song. If you've never heard it and are only going to take one song from this record, it would definitely be Psycho Killer. But I also really like the closing track, which is a little bit more upbeat, pulled up. This here ends on a more hopeful tone and kind of leaves the listener going away a little more happy than if Psycho Killer ended the entire record. And here somebody pulled up the narrator of the song when they were in a downward slope, and they were there for him, helped inspire some hope. I enjoyed that one, and that's going to move us to the favorite tracks. Psycho Killer, Pulled Up. The book I read, those would be my top 3 songs, and that's going to take us to the overall score of the record. I thought this was a great introduction to the Talking Heads, and I know this isn't even close to their most acclaimed record that we're going to get in the later 70s, early 80s, so I'm excited to hear what those sound like. The delivery of Byrne and his vocals, I can see maybe turning some people off that aren't used to alternative music, maybe, but for me it worked very well. It made the Talking Heads have a distinct sound along with their oftentimes ominous musical backing, guitar tones, stuff like that. I'm going to give an 8.0 to this record. It definitely grew on me through repeated listens, and I'm excited to keep going through the Talking Heads discography, man. And if you have heard this record, please let me know what your thoughts are of it. What is your favorite track? That'll about do it for today. I want to give a special shout out to all the Patreon supporters that help support the channel. It allows us to do some reviews of these bands that maybe aren't the biggest bands in the world per se, don't pull as many views in, but they're awesome music nonetheless that we love to review and get to. So if you'd like to join the movement there, we have a link to our Patreon down below, as well as our Facebook group. Love to have you over there at that great community. And if you enjoyed this, hit that big red subscribe button. We put up videos multiple times a week. I thank you guys for stopping by. Looking forward to it next time, and happy listening, my friends. I will see you soon.